Hey, and welcome back. Today we're going to be vectorizing that drawing of that pizza I made. And so we're going to just go through a little bit. I'm just trying this out, the narration style, and seeing if this works out for you guys. If you like it, let me know in the comments below, but let's get into it. So first off, I go ahead and I start to make sure that I have all my pen and my stroke settings correct, make sure that I'm prepared for what I want to actually accomplish. So I want to make sure that I have the right strokes, the thickness that I'm considering, whether or not I am prepared for this to actually be cut, because obviously in the long term you want to be able to set up something in the beginning with the whole thought of how it's going to be cut and how it's going to be made. And if you're making a file for either yourself or say for a I don't know, for an Etsy shop, if you're selling these files, you just want to make sure all of these things are kind of set. That way you can just kind of go into the creation process without there being much of a stop and start or redo kind of situation. So overall, I just make sure that my strokes are good, the thickness, the line weight, everything is basically ready to go. So that's what I'm doing right here, right now, and I'm just kind of making sure everything is working the way I want it to. And I'm testing out a few tools to really get a feel for what it is that I'm going to be making. So as I go along here, I'm just kind of creating some dots for the crust right now. Those are the flecks of cheese or whatnot. I go around, I make sure that I keep a very organic type of style as I'm going through the process, making sure that the strokes and everything are organic, because what you want to do, obviously I want to make sure that this looks correct to me as the artist, and I want to make sure that this is going to relate. And also, on top of it, considering you as the consumer, or even somebody who's just getting this file, you want to make sure that they'll be able to use it. So I just really take the time to make sure that I don't have any sharp points or anything that might be overlapping for strokes, and just making sure that everything is, once you get it, is ready to be cut and just ready to be manufactured in whatever sense that's going to be done by. So right now I'm just kind of going through and making sure I get all my shapes for my pepperonis and my black olives, and then just getting all the cheesy oil shapes all done, getting that all set up. And as I'm doing this, I'm still keeping in mind that this isn't the final part of it. It's more of a starting template for what it is I want it to finally be when we're all done. So again, I'll jump into an outline mode here in a second, so you'll see everything isn't necessarily ready to be cut. This is all very temporary in the sense that I just need to make it so then I can make the adjustments that I need. So as you can tell, this isn't ready to be cut. So I like making copies of all my work, saving as I go along. And as I'm doing this, I'm really thinking about how it's all going to be cut, how it's all going to be made. You obviously don't want weird little settings or little points and things that just don't belong in your file. So you want to go ahead and get rid of those, make them as smooth as possible. I like to go through and click through and just make sure everything is as tight as it can be, in a sense of making it ready for production artwork. So as I go along through this, I'm just really thinking about the final process. So as you can see, I put a black box behind my work. Essentially, what I'm getting to is I want to see how this is going to look in a environment that I think it's going to, like a back of a windshield or a glass of some surface, And for some, for the most part, especially with rear mirrors, or I should say windows of vehicles, you see a lot of those like stick families and things like that come up, and those work really well because they're on a high contrast level. That way they can be seen very easily. So that's why you're able to see them so well, because that window is very dark. And then basically what I'm trying to do is, since I know I'm going to be probably putting this on my windshield or a windshield, I want to make sure that I can see it very clearly, especially from a distance, so that you can, present it well. So right now, I'm just going through each little part, still making sure that each point is corrected to the point where I am comfortable with, giving this file to someone else so they can cut it. And I don't want to give somebody something that I don't actually think will work. I don't want to give them a bunch of lines, overlapping shapes, strokes, that kind of thing. So I really like to take the time to craft the actual design and make sure that what I'm doing is going to give that same effect that I want. So in Illustrator, you can offset paths and change different strokes and types as you go through it. And all I'm doing here is really seeing where my problems are with sharp edges, rounding off points. Because for the most part, when you're doing this type of work, you really want to make sure that you are considering the final process. Because even a plotter, even though it would work with this SVG file, even if I left it as is, it still wouldn't produce a very good graphic in the end. So I like taking the time to really think about how it's going to be produced, because having that final design just being cut, weeded, taped, and ready to go makes a huge amount of difference to people. And I like to make sure I have these designs ready for that. So I like giving a lot of, breathing area around certain graphics. Just making sure that there isn't going to be an issue with like a weed, like when you're pulling the vinyl off of the backer, that there isn't going to be some sort of weird kink in it that's going to cause either the vinyl to rip or just for someone being frustrated and dealing with it. So I like to make sure all of these things are taken care of ahead of time. And what I do is I go around, and especially on points that I know are sharp, I'll go in there and I'll actually round them off and make sure that that's a very smooth transition, especially for the blade, because you don't want the blade stopping and starting. You could lose registration. For the most part, I know a lot of that doesn't happen, but it could be a possibility, and I don't want there to be an issue where it picks up, possibly moves, and comes back down and it doesn't cut quite well. And keeping a very smooth transition from point to point and in an organic fashion, so a very smooth or rounded type of function, that in itself helps the plotter actually cut better. When you have very sharp edges, sure, you can produce squares and rectangles and everything like that, and I'm not saying that you can't. All I'm saying is that when you want a very complex thing to be cut well, and you don't want to have the problems with weeding it afterwards and dealing with these little issues as you're working with it, you want to make sure these things are taken care of ahead of time, and all I'm doing is making sure that it's taken care of for you. So as you can see here, I'm looking around for little issues, making sure that the full actual piece is ready to go. And at this point, I'm actually at the time where I feel like I've gotten pretty much everything done. I like putting outlines on all of my work for the most part, but this one in particular, because I really like the way it looks when it has a nice outline, really makes it pop. And again, I'm just making sure like little edges aren't connecting and touching and making a problem. So overall, this is my final piece, but I'm not quite done yet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a copy of this, and after I make a copy of this, I'm going to make a couple of different versions of the same file. So I'm going to just release some compound paths and things like that, and really kind of open up the design a little bit, because essentially the design's done. I like making alternate versions of it, because you never know what's going to work best for you in a certain situation. You know, again, I come back to how something's being produced, and if it's something that you don't want to take a whole lot of time with, and you have another version that could work just as good, you want to go ahead and use that asset so you're not going back and forth and trying to figure something else out in the process. So I'm right here, I'm just going ahead and just going through all the little details of what I want to keep and what I want to eliminate and what I want to change. So as I group things together and come up with my final design, this is kind of where I'm at for the completed job. So I'm going to make some other adjustments, especially cleaning up the file and making sure everything's ready to go. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.